Drama king, huh? The day my heart quit drumming, my crown slipped, and I decided the kingdom of my wallet would go quiet. They say the worst sound in a hospital is the monitor, not the beeping itself, but the way it argues with your pulse. Mine stuttered like a cheap metronome while some kid in scrubs called me sir and wedged nitro under my tongue. I'm 66, not made of glass. I built bridges and turbines, held tolerances thinner than a hair. But that morning in the plant, fluorescence buzzing, coffee burned a tar, something inside me misfired. Felt like a wrench thrown into gears. I went down holding my chest and my late wife's brass compass, the one she made me promise I'd carry when she passed. So you always know true north, Stan. Her voice still lives in that metal. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. They rode me in on a gurney that shook like a grocery cart with a bad wheel. Cold, antiseptic, ceiling tiles with coffee stains shaped like states I never got around to seeing. A nurse with stern braid said, "We'll call your daughter." "What's her name?" "Yara." I mumbled. Speed dial 1. "Of course," she said, the way people say of course when they're sure about the world's goodness. She pressed the number while they clipped me to wires. I watched the ringback glow on the screen. 1, 2, 3. Voicemail. She tried again, bless her optimism. This time Yara picked up. The nurse put on speaker. "Ms. Little, your father is at a cardiac event. We need you here." There was music in the background, the kind with a bass you feel in your teeth. Yara's voice was bright, party bright. "I'm kind of in the middle of something. Can you, keep me posted by text?" "Ma'am, it's serious." "I'm aware. He's always serious. Just text." The call ended. The nurse looked at me like maybe I'd break. I didn't. I swallowed the taste of pennies, stared at the compass in my palm. True north, Stan. Keep your bearing. While they adjusted the 4, I thumbed my phone. Habit. I'd paid Yara's first down payment. Co-signed her car. Helped shovel her fiancé Theodore out of crater debt like a man with a garden spade against a sinkhole. You do that for blood. That morning, my savings, which still had my wife's name on the account, were set to move one last chunk. 180 grand to lock their house down forever. A father's promise. Click scheduled. My thumb wandered to Yara's social. New photo. She and Theodore at some rooftop with Edison bulbs and skinny martinis, his arm around her like a boast. The caption hit me harder than the nitro. Finally, a day without the drama king. Public. Geotagged. Hearts piling up like confetti in a gutter. For a second, the beeping slowed, or maybe I learned to hear past it. The world narrowed to that caption, and the compass warming in my fist. I remember the year I worked doubles to keep her in college when she decided philosophy was a feeling and not a degree. The time I sold my boat to cover her ER bill after a girls' weekend ended the way tequila always ends. I remember the little girl Yara who used to fall asleep in my flannel listening to ball games, who once tucked a dandelion in my pocket and called it a son you can carry. The nurse said, soft, "We can try her again." "No," I said. My voice surprised both of us. It had steel in it I hadn't used since the funeral. Let her have her day. I pulled my glasses down, the old man move I swore I'd never adopt, and opened my banking app. There it was. Transfer. Scheduled $180,000. The numbers looked like they were already leaving me. I could feel the weight of every favor, every bailout, every just this once that turned into always. A man can be generous until the generosity starts burning his name. The compass ticked against my ring finger as if it had a heartbeat of its own. True north, I said under machine noise. Not noisy north, not guilty north. I scrolled to contacts. Found the one marked First National. My thumb hovered. The nurse adjusted my oxygen. Somewhere, a janitor's cart squeaked past like a mouse. Outside, sirens stretched a note across the city. "Stanley," the nurse asked, "do you need anything?" "Yeah," I breathed. I need to stop pretending that love means funding disrespect. My thumb steadied. The glass was cool, my skin was warm, and the space between them felt like a lifetime of yes I couldn't afford anymore. I pressed. People think revenge is loud. Gunshots, broken glass, tires screeching. But the most brutal revenge I ever dealt was silence over a phone line. They kept me in that hospital bed 3 days. Tubes in my arm, wires on my chest, nurses asking if I preferred pudding or Jell-O like it was a life-altering decision. The beeping monitor became my roommate. Steady when I slept, frantic when I dreamed of Yara at 6 years old, waving at me from a little league bleacher. Back then, her voice was sunshine. Now her voice was voicemail. On the second night, a banker called to confirm the transfer. Mr. Little, just making sure, 180,000 correct? Schedule for tomorrow? I stared at the ceiling stain shaped like Texas. My chest still hurt, but it wasn't a heart attack anymore. It was her caption, burned behind my eyelids. Finally, a day without the drama king. The phrase clanged like an iron gate. Cancel it, I said. Silence on the line, except for the faint clicking of a keyboard. Sir, the penalty. Cancel. Today. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't in years. Control. Not of my body. That was still stitched together with meds and caution, but of the story. My story. For decades, I've been a side character in Yara's tale. The provider, the ATM with a pulse, the backdrop to her spotlight selfies. Canceling that transfer wasn't just money. It was reclaiming authorship. The next morning, Theodore himself called. I let it ring twice before answering. Stan, he said with that fake warmth people use at job interviews. Hey, we noticed the payment didn't go through. Some glitch. No glitch, I said. Glitches fix themselves. This was deliberate. A pause. I could imagine him pacing, that restless salesman energy. Look, we got contractors scheduled, furniture financed. Yara's counting on this. I counted on Yara, too, I said. Didn't pan out. He chuckled, brittle. Stan, don't make this personal. It's only personal, Theo. Always was. I ended the call. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt awake. Later that day, a nurse brought me my phone charger. I shouldn't have checked social again, but temptation's a hell of a thing. Yara had posted a boomerang of champagne flutes clinking, her caption, manifesting abundance. The comments, Queen Energy, so blessed, all while her father lay in a hospital gown that tied wrong in the back. I whispered the compass in my palm. Abundance comes with receipts. By the time they discharged me, the silence between me and Yara was louder than any argument we'd ever had. She didn't visit, didn't call, didn't even DM. Just glittering posts, Theodore's arm tighter, her smile sharper. Maybe she thought ignoring me would make the problem dissolve, like debt under fresh credit. But banks don't forgive. Auctions don't pause for hashtags. And a father who's finally learned his worth, he doesn't bend twice. I stepped out of that hospital into cold sunlight, air tasting like disinfectant and freedom. My chest ached, sure, but it was the ache of healing. I gripped the brass compass. North, always north. No more rerouting for guilt. And in that moment, I knew. The first domino had already fallen. And when it hit the second, the noise would be deafening. They say a man's wealth is measured by the size of his funeral crowd. I started to wonder if mine would just be the nurse who tried calling my daughter twice. Back home, the house felt emptier than ever. Not just because my wife's laugh had been gone 10 years, or because Yara hadn't set foot there since Thanksgiving 3 years back, leaving early, bored by the old man's stories. No, the emptiness was sharper now. It had a soundtrack, silence where a daughter's voice should have been. I sat at the kitchen table with bills spread out like tarot cards. Mortgage statements, utility receipts, the hospital's itemized estimate. I used to treat these like enemies to conquer. Pay them down, strike them off. But that morning, I studied them differently. Each one was a story of how I traded my sweat for someone else's comfort. Yara's down payment. Yara's new SUV when her last one just stopped working. Theodore's tuition debt. I had patched their lives with my labor until mine tore open. My phone buzzed. A notification. Not from her. Never from her, but from the community page. Photos of an upcoming auction. Big red letters. Foreclosure. I recognized the address before I saw the name. Yara's house. My house. If we're honest, the house I built with years of double shifts and overtime, now listed like a used appliance. They'd set the auction for a Saturday morning in the Courthouse Square. I knew those auctions. Strangers lifting paddles. Numbers barked like cattle calls. I imagined Theodore's jaw tightening, Yara's mascara streaked, both of them forced to stand under the courthouse clock, while bidders picked over what was never truly theirs. Public, humiliating. For a moment, guilt flared. That fatherly instinct to save her, rush in, write another check. Then I remembered the caption again. Drama King. Not Dad. Not my father. Just Drama King. My chest twinged, but I breathed through it. The cardiologist had told me, listen to your body. My body was telling me no more rescues. That night, I polished the compass. My wife's voice echoed, true north, Stan. I realized north didn't mean fixing every mistake Yara made. North meant standing tall, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. Friday evening, Theodore called again. His tone had slipped from friendly to frantic. Stan, listen, they're about to... I know, I said. I read the papers. Please, this will ruin us. No, I corrected. This will reveal you. He tried cursing, bargaining, begging. I listened, stone still. Then I hung up, letting the silence be my final word. The next morning, I shaved clean, put on my old Sunday jacket, and drove to the courthouse square. Not to save them, to witness, to mark the moment when the pedestal I'd built for my daughter finally crumbled. As the auctioneer's voice cracked like a whip and strangers raised paddles, I kept my hands folded over the compass in my pocket. Each bid was a nail in the coffin of my old life. Each shout was another reminder. I was done funding disrespect. And when the gavel came down, it wasn't just the house that was sold. It was my old role as their silent benefactor. The square echoed with applause from buyers, but all I heard was the sound of crown hitting the ground. They thought the auction was the end. Truth is, it was only the trailer before the feature. I stood on the courthouse steps that morning like a man at his own trial. Except I wasn't a defendant anymore. Yara and Theodore were. They arrived late, rushing to the crowd, her heels clattering against the stone, his tie crooked, sweat staining his collar. People turned, neighbors, acquaintances, even strangers, drawn to the scent of a downfall. That's the thing about small-town America. Humiliation travels faster than gossip and cheaper than gas. The auctioneer's chant carried like a freight train. 190, 195, 200. Paddles rose, fell, rose again. Each shout carved another line into Yara's face. Theodore tried to whisper comfort, but she shook him off, mascara bleeding under her sunglasses. I almost pitted her, almost reached for my phone, almost made the call to stop it all. Almost. Then I remembered the caption again. The photo, the smirk, the words. Finally, a day without the Drama King. And that almost died on the courthouse steps. When the gavel slammed, sold. The sound was thunder in her world, but music in mine. A man in a bald cap grinned, shaking hands with the clerk. The house I bought her was no longer hers, or mine. It was a stranger's prize. Yara swayed like she might collapse. Theodore too busy texting someone to catch her. People whispered. Some clucked tongues in sympathy. Others smirked, the way crowds always do when the mighty fall. Yara had spent years curating her life for their approval. Designer bags, glossy photos, hashtags like hashtag living my best life. And now she was standing in the square stripped bare, her best life sold to the highest bidder. I didn't speak. I didn't move toward her. That was part of the punishment. My absence, my refusal to rescue. The silence was heavier than any words I could have thrown. She scanned the crowd, maybe searching for me, maybe just searching for an exit. Our eyes never met. I made sure of it. Back in my truck, I sat with the compass warm in my palm. My wife's voice in my head. True north, Stan. For years I thought north meant providing, fixing, enabling. Now I saw the truth. North was boundaries. North was dignity. North was finally stepping out of the role of eternal savior. Later that evening, Theodore showed up at my porch. He didn't knock at first, just lingered like a salesman rehearsing his pitch. When he finally tapped the screen door, I answered with the same calm the auctioneer had shown. "Stan," he said, trying for charm but landing on desperation. "We can work this out. Maybe just a loan, short term. You know Yara can't handle." "She's handling it," I said. "I saw her. She's still breathing." He shifted, eyes darting like a raccoon near headlights. "It's not fair to let her sink like this. You're her father." I leaned on the doorframe. I was her father. Now I'm just a man who paid his dues. His mouth opened, but I closed the door before he found a retort. The click of the latch was louder than his words ever could have been. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the compass glinting under the lamplight. For the first time in decades, I wasn't planning how to fix someone else's mess. I was planning something new, my own freedom, and as I drifted to sleep, one thought pulsed steady as a heartbeat. If silence in a courthouse could break her world, imagine what else silence might build for mine. They didn't just lose a house that day. They lost the illusion that I'd always be the safety net, stretched beneath their high-wire act. The week after the auction, my phone became a battlefield. Missed calls stacked like sandbags, voicemails spilling with Yara's voice. Angry, desperate, tearful, then back to angry again. I didn't listen past the first few seconds. Not because I didn't care, but because I'd heard every version of that script before. "You're overreacting. You're supposed to help me. What kind of father does this?" Same old chorus, different verse. Instead, I filled my days with things I'd neglected. My tools sat rusty in the garage, so I polished them until the steel shone. I walked the river trail where my wife and I used to fish, the one Yara always rolled her eyes at because nature's boring. Funny how the air tasted cleaner when nobody was complaining beside me. On Thursday evening, my neighbor Bill stopped by with a casserole. Word had spread, of course, it always does. "Heard about the auction," he said carefully, like he was stepping onto thin ice. "Tough deal." "Tough for who?" I asked. He shifted. "Well, for Yara, I guess." I gave him a look sharp enough to cut string. "Bill, my daughter wasn't evicted. She was unmasked." He nodded slowly, the way men nod when they realize they've wandered into deeper water than they planned. We ate in silence, and that silence tasted better than any pity he might have offered. By Saturday, Theodore was gone. Packed his things, left Yara with nothing but empty closets and a stack of unpaid bills. The breakup wasn't public at first, but in our town, privacy lasts about as long as ice cream in July. Word hit the church crowd before it hit me. When I finally saw it online, Yara had posted a photo of herself in oversized sunglasses with the caption, "Stronger alone." Comments flooded with sympathy. I could almost hear the clinking of pity likes. But pity doesn't pay rent. Pity doesn't fix a total credit score. And pity sure as hell doesn't rebuild a reputation once people start whispering that maybe, just maybe, she was a villain in her own story. That night, she finally showed up at my door. No Theodore, no glossy smile. Just Yara, makeup smudged, shoulders slumped, voice cracked from crying. She didn't knock hard, just 3 soft taps like she was afraid the wood might break under her hand. "Dad," she said when I opened, "I need you." 3 words I'd once have given blood to hear. Now they sounded less like love and more like a summons. She didn't mean "I want you." She meant "I want what you can give me." I let the silence stretch. Crickets hummed outside. A dog barked down the street. She fidgeted with her phone, waiting for me to break first. "Dad, please," she tried again. "I can't do this." Theodore left. "The bank." "I know. I cut in. I read the papers." Her lip trembled. "You can't just stand by and watch me drown." I held the compass in my pocket, the metal warm from my palm. Sometimes drowning teaches you to swim. Her eyes flashed anger, then collapsed into tears. "You're cruel." "No," I said, my voice steady. "I'm finally honest." I closed the door. The click of the lock felt like a hymn. For years I'd been the net, the cushion, the fallback. But that night I realized something truer. The only thing keeping me from peace wasn't her need. It was my surrender. And I wasn't surrendering anymore. They say rock bottom is when you lose everything. I disagree. Rock bottom is when you lose respect, yours and everyone else's. After I shut the door on Yara, the neighborhood buzzed like a hornet's nest. Folks love a fall from grace, especially one they can see from their porch. By Monday, I couldn't walk into the diner without overhearing whispers. That Stan's girl lost her house, man ran out on her. The same mouths that once praised her Instagram perfect life now twisted in gossip. Reputation is a balloon. It floats high until the first pinprick. Yara's had popped in the middle of Main Street. I ordered black coffee and sat at the counter, the compass heavy in my jacket. The waitress, June, poured without asking. She'd known me since before Yara could spell her own name. "Heard about your girl," she said carefully. "You holding up?" "I'm fine," I said. Better than fine. And I meant it. The bitterness that used to sit in my chest like tar was dissolving. Watching Yara's mask crack in public wasn't joy, it was justice. Later that afternoon, the town held its Rotary Club meeting in the community hall. I hadn't been in years, but something pulled me there. Maybe curiosity, maybe instinct. When I walked in, there she was, Yara, sitting alone at a folding table, surrounded by folks who used to cheer her on. The air had that charged quality, the hush before a storm. One woman leaned over and asked, "So, Yara, what's next for you?" Her tone was syrupy, but her eyes were sharp. Everyone waited for the performance. The next hashtag, the miracle comeback. Yara fumbled, muttering about new opportunities and finding herself. Her voice cracked. Theodore's absence hung beside her like a ghost. Then, as if fate had a sense of theater, the mayor mentioned the foreclosure. Shame about that house. Fine property. Heads turned. Yara flushed crimson. She tried to laugh it off, but the sound wobbled. In that hall, with plastic chairs squeaking and a flag drooping in the corner, my daughter faced the one humiliation she couldn't edit or filter. Exposure. I didn't gloat. I didn't rescue. I just sat in the back, sipping weak coffee, letting her face the weight of her choices. That was her second public fall, and it cut deeper than the auction. This time it wasn't strangers watching. It was her own community, the people she wanted to impress most. When she spotted me across the room, her eyes widened. For a heartbeat, I saw the little girl who used to look for me in the crowd at her school plays, hoping for a proud smile. But I didn't smile. I held her gaze, calm as stone, and then looked away. That broke her more than any words could. Driving home, I rolled the compass in my hand, the brass warming with each mile. I thought of my wife, how she'd always said dignity wasn't about being loud. It was about being steady. Yara had traded steadiness for spectacle. Now she was learning that spectacle can't hold you up when the ground disappears. That night, I sat on the porch with the cicadas buzzing. The air smelled like rain. I realized something. Every time Yara stumbled publicly, I felt less like a villain and more like a man reclaiming what was his. My peace, my respect, my life, and if she thought the town's judgment was the worst of it, she hadn't seen the storm still coming. They thought I'd cave after the second public fall. Truth is, that was only the rehearsal. The main act was still waiting in the wings. A month passed, and the phone kept ringing. Yara's number. I let every call bleed into voicemail. Sometimes I'd hear the first seconds, her voice then rehearsed, then cracking. "Dad, I'm sorry. Please, I can't." Delete. Other times it was fire and venom. "You don't get it. You ruined me." Delete. I'd sit with my coffee, thumb hovering, then press the red trash icon like it was a ritual cleansing. Freedom doesn't arrive with fanfare. It creeps in. A quiet morning without drama, a walk to the river where the water doesn't ask for money, a meal cooked just for yourself. My doctor told me stress was poison. Cutting Yara loose felt like an antidote. Then came her birthday. I hadn't been invited in years. Truth is, I'd stopped expecting the courtesy. But this time, the invite came directly. A carefully worded text. "Dad, I'd love for you to come celebrate. Just family. Please." It reeked of strategy, not sincerity. Still, curiosity nudged me. Maybe I needed to see the next act play out. The party was at a rented hall downtown. Nothing like the mansion dream she once flaunted. Plastic tablecloths, streamers from the dollar store, cake ordered last minute. I walked in, compass tucked in my pocket, jacket pressed. Eyes turned, whispers spread. People knew what had happened. They were waiting for the scene. Yara greeted me with a brittle smile, arms open. Dad, you came. Cameras clicked. Always cameras. She wanted the photo, the performance of reconciliation. Her friends, fewer now, circled like vultures, ready to consume the narrative. Prodigal daughter, forgiving father. I leaned in just enough of a flash, then whispered so only she could hear, I'm not your backdrop anymore. Her grip faltered. She pulled back, still smiling for the crowd, but her eyes screamed. The evening unraveled from there. Someone mentioned Theodore, an uncle, maybe, with too much punch in his glass. The room tightened. Yara laughed too loud, too sharp. The mask slipped. A murmur spread. Everyone knew he'd left her flat. She snapped at the uncle, voice cracking, then tried to recover. But the recovery never came. By the time the cake was cut, she was trembling. When it came my turn to take a slice, I set the plate down untouched. Sweet enough without it, I said, and walked toward the exit. Murmurs followed me out the door. People saw it. People understood. That night wasn't her rebirth. It was her third public unraveling. On the street, under the yellow glow of a flickering lamp, I pulled out the compass. My wife's voice again. True north, Stan. True north. For years, I thought north was providing until it hurt. Now I knew. North was refusing to be used, even if it made me the villain in someone else's story. I drove home in silence, headlights carving the dark. I realized I didn't need to raise my voice, didn't need to strike or scream. My revenge was playing out in plain sight, one stage at a time, and the curtain hadn't even dropped yet. They say revenge is best served cold. I learned it's best served slow, with the whole town watching each bite. After the birthday fiasco, the town had plenty to chew on. Stories multiplied in diners, barbershops, and church pews. By Tuesday morning, half the county knew about Yara's meltdown over the cake. By Thursday, even strangers at the gas station were whispering, "Aren't you her father?" With that mix of pity and schadenfreude people can't hide. I didn't offend her. I didn't scold them, either. I just let the silence do the work. The silence was my sharpest tool now, sharper than any words I could throw. But something inside me shifted. For the first time in years, my thoughts weren't only about Yara. They were about me, about what I wanted the rest of my life to look like. The heart attack had been a warning shot. Mortality tapping me on the shoulder, saying, "You can't keep carrying everyone else's weight." So I started selling. First the old family house, the one too big for one man, two full echoes. Realtors walked through with clipboards, pretending not to notice the indentations where my wife's chair once sat, or the dent in the banister from Yara's bike crash at 12. I didn't flinch. I signed the papers with steady hands. When the check cleared, I didn't hand it to Yara. I didn't invest in her comeback. I invested in me. Found a modest cabin by the river, where the trees whispered instead of people. One story, easy on the knees, porch that faced the sunset. The first night I slept there, windows open to the sound of frogs and flowing water, I felt something I hadn't in decades. Peace without conditions. Yara called again, dozens of times. I answered once, out of curiosity. "Dad, where are you?" she demanded. "Your house is empty. People are saying you sold it. Tell me you didn't." "I did." "Why?" "That was supposed to be mine someday." Her entitlement clanged louder than the auctioneer's gavel had weeks earlier. "It was never yours," I said. "You just lived like it already was." She went silent, stunned, then snapped, "You're losing it. Nobody sells a family home for a shack in the woods." "It's not a shack," I corrected. "It's mine, and that makes all the difference." I hung up before she could spit venom. The river outside answered for me, carrying her words downstream where I didn't have to chase them. That weekend, I unpacked boxes, books I hadn't touched in years, photos I finally had space to frame. I found the compass on the mantel, placed it beside my wife's picture. North at last. And for the first time, I stopped checking my phone. Because the more Yara screamed into the void, the more I realized the void was exactly where her words belonged. They tell you blood is thicker than water. Maybe so, but the river outside my cabin proved something else. Water washes blood clean. Life by the river had a rhythm I hadn't felt since before my wife died. Mornings with black coffee on the porch, watching mist lift off the surface. Afternoons tinkering with old tools. The kind of work where sweat meant satisfaction, not obligation. Evenings with baseball on the radio. Crackling like it used to when my dad and I sat in the garage with a six-pack between us. My heart, the same one that nearly quit on me, found a new pace. Not the frantic stutter of stress, not the heavy thud of guilt, but steady like the current itself. I told my doctor I'd traded family drama for river silence. He chuckled and said, "That's better medicine than anything I could prescribe." But peace never lasts without interruption. One afternoon, a thick envelope came by certified mail. Yara's handwriting on the return address. But the contents weren't her words. It was legal paperwork. Her attempt to contest my finances. She wanted clarification on assets. Claimed she was entitled to a portion of my estate in anticipation. Anticipation. As if she was circling, waiting for me to drop dead like a buzzard over roadkill. I didn't rage. Didn't slam the table. I simply walked to the fireplace, tossed the envelope into the flames, and watched the edges curl into ash. Let the lawyers chase ghosts. I'd already made my move. That week, I went to my attorney. A quiet office above a pharmacy, the kind that still smelled of ink and leather. We went line by line through my will. I scratched Yara's name clean off the pages. Not a dime, not a trinket, not even the compass. Every cent, every asset, every legacy, redirected to a veterans charity, the one my wife used to donate to in secret, back when we didn't have much, but she insisted someone always has less. The pen felt heavy in my hand, but steady. When I signed, it was more than ink. It was closure. For years, I'd lived with the illusion that legacy meant inheritance. That love was measured in what you left behind. But my wife's compass reminded me, legacy isn't property. It's principle. As I walked out of that office, I felt lighter. The sun was high, the street humming with traffic, but inside me there was a hush. I'd done what needed doing. Yara would never understand it. She'd call it betrayal, maybe cruelty. But in truth, it was the cleanest mercy I had left to give her, freedom from dependence, and freedom for me from the chains of her entitlement. That night, the river sang louder than usual, swollen with rain upstream. I stood on the porch, compass in one hand, glass of bourbon in the other, and said out loud, "True North, sweetheart, I finally found it." And for the first time, I didn't wonder if Yara was watching. I didn't care. They say time heals. But time doesn't heal lies. It just gives them longer legs to run on. By autumn, the leaves around the cabin had turned red and gold, the river reflecting every shade like stained glass. My days were steady, predictable, peaceful, until Yara found a new way to break the quiet. It started small, posts on her social media, photos of her with borrowed cars, caption, "Bouncing back stronger than ever," or "Never count a queen out." At first I ignored them. People bluff when they're drowning. But then I noticed the comments. Friends, acquaintances, even strangers chiming in, "Didn't your dad cut you off? Thought you lost your house?" She fired back with venom. "Don't believe everything you hear. My father is sick. He's confused. He's not the man he used to be. Sick, confused." I read those words with my wife's compass in my hand. Its brass catching the porch light. That was her angle now. If she couldn't guilt me, she'd discredit me. Paint me as an old man slipping into senility. A drama king turned doddering fool. The smear spread quick. At the grocery store, I caught two clerks whispering, glancing at me like I might forget how to count change. At church, one of the ushers asked gently if I needed help filling out the hymnal. It stung. Not because they believed it, but because Yara had planted the seed. Once a seed is planted, people water it with doubt. I didn't confront her. Not yet. That wasn't my way anymore. I let her think the rumor mill was hers to spin. What she didn't know was that the truth has its own gravity. It pulls lies apart over time. And I had patience. More patience than she had followers. Still, there was a moment that cut deep. At the diner, June poured my coffee like always, then leaned in. Stan, off the record, you doing all right? I mean memory, health, that sort of thing? Her voice was soft, but the question was sharp as a nail. I met her eyes. Steady. I'm fine, June. Better than fine. My daughter's just learning the hard way that you can't eat respect for breakfast. She studied me for a long second, then nodded. The trust returned to her eyes. But the damage was done. Yara had managed a small victory. A public jab. A tiny crack in the image I'd rebuilt. That night, I sat by the river with the compass warm in my fist and thought of my wife again. She'd hated lies. Once told Yara as a child, truth is like the tide, baby. It always comes back, no matter how far it goes. I decided then I wouldn't shout, wouldn't fight her smear campaign head on. I'd let her lies stack up, wobbling under their own weight. And when they fell, it would be in front of the same crowd she'd tried to impress. Because revenge isn't about speed. It's about timing. And my timing was just getting started. They say the past is a chain you drag behind you. I say it's a compass. You can choose whether it points you home or to hell. Winter settled over the river like a heavy quilt. Frost on the windows, wood smoke curling from the chimney, radio humming low-ball games from the AM dial. My world had grown smaller, but steadier. Each day was mine alone, until the letter arrived. A creamy envelope, hand-delivered by a courier. The seal wasn't Yara's handwriting this time. It was from her lawyer, a petition. She was contesting my will, trying to claw her way back into an inheritance she hadn't earned. The words on the page were legal daggers. Undue influence, diminished capacity, fiduciary breach. In short, she was doubling down on her smear, that I'd lost my mind, that I wasn't fit to decide what happened with my own life's work. I laughed, a low, bitter laugh that echoed through the cabin. The audacity of it. After all I'd given, all I'd lost, now she wanted to put me on trial for sanity itself. I drove into town to meet my attorney again. The office smelled of old paper and dust, a place where truth was inked line by line. He read the petition, eyebrows climbing. Stan, she's playing dirty. She's playing desperate. I corrected, and desperation always shows. We drafted our response, meticulous, airtight, leaving no corner for doubt. I attached medical records proving my soundness, financial records showing every decision was deliberate. Each document was a nail in the coffin of her claim. And as I signed the stack, I realized something. This wasn't just defense. It was offense. Every page proved I wasn't broken, that my revenge wasn't madness, it was method. Court was scheduled for spring. News traveled fast, of course. The diner buzzed with speculation. The church pews hummed with whispers. Some sided with me. Others wondered if Yara might be right. The smear campaign had done its work. But I didn't flinch. I knew trials aren't just legal, they're theatrical. And I had the patience for an audience. That night by the fire, I opened an old photo album. Yara at 5, missing her front teeth, holding the brass compass like it was treasure. My wife in the background, smiling soft. A pang hit me. Grief for what could have been, for the family that might have survived if love had outweighed pride. But grief is just another form of energy. I closed the album and whispered to the river outside, north, always north. I realized then that this fight wasn't about money or houses or wills. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about proving, to her and to myself, that I wasn't the drama king she mocked. I was a man who refused to be erased. And if she wanted a courtroom to be our final stage, I'd step into it steady, compass in hand. Because some battles aren't fought for victory. They're fought to remind the world you're still standing. They say the courtroom is a place of justice. I say it's a theater, and every lie is just a bad actor waiting to forget his lines. Spring came fast, melting snow into the river until it roared louder than I'd ever heard. By the time I stepped into the courthouse, that roar was inside me. The room smelled of old with polish and nervous sweat. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and every bench was filled, neighbors, co-workers from years back. Even folks I didn't recognize but who knew the story. Small towns love trials. They're free entertainment. Yara walked in like a movie star late to premiere. Black dress, oversized sunglasses, chin high. She had Theodore's replacement at her side. A man I didn't bother learning the name of. Her lawyer carried a stack of papers like a holy book. She looked around the room as though the crowd owed her applause. But whispers ripple louder than claps, and the whispers weren't kind. When the judge called us to order, Yara's lawyer went first. His voice oiled smooth, full of practiced outrage. Your Honor, my client has been deprived of her rightful inheritance by a father clearly suffering from diminished capacity. He has made irrational decisions, selling the family home, redirecting funds, excluding his only daughter. This pattern demonstrates confusion, paranoia, and undue influence. I didn't flinch. Let him paint his picture. I brought my own canvas. My attorney stood calm as a surgeon. He laid out my medical reports. Clean bill of cognitive health, signed by 2 specialists. He presented financial statements showing deliberate choices, timed to the day of my hospital release. Then he revealed the updated will, detailed, intentional. Every dollar redirected to charity with explanations in my own handwriting. This is not the work of a confused man, he said, voice steady. This is the work of a man reclaiming dignity. Murmurs spread through the benches. Even the judge leaned forward. Yara's face tightened beneath her sunglasses, her lips pressed white. Then came the moment that gutted her. My attorney called June, the diner waitress, as a witness. She testified about my daily clarity, our conversations, how I remembered names, orders, stories with perfect detail. Stan's sharper than most folks half his age, she told the court. If he's confused, then we all are. Laughter rippled through the gallery. Public laughter, the kind that stains deeper than any verdict. Yara's mask cracked. She hissed something to her lawyer, who tried to salvage dignity with objections, but the air had already shifted. The community saw her for what she was. Not a dutiful daughter protecting her father, but a desperate woman clawing at a legacy she didn't deserve. When court adjourned for the day, I walked out steady, compass in my pocket, the weight of the river in my chest. Outside, cameras from local news crews flashed. Someone asked if I had a comment. I just held up the compass, brass glinting in the sun, and said, "True north never lies." The clip ran on the evening broadcast, and by nightfall, Yara's third mass had shattered. The public won. But I knew the final act wasn't the verdict. It was what came after, when the applause faded and silence returned. They say victory tastes sweet, but in a small town, it tastes like silence, the kind that follows when life finally dies. The trial wrapped quicker than anyone expected. The judge didn't waste words. He leaned forward, peered over his glasses, and said flat as steel, "Mr. Little is of sound mind. Petition denied." The gavel cracked once, and that was it. Months of Yara's scheming, her whispers, her smear campaign, reduced to ash in a single sentence. The gallery shifted, people rising, some nodding toward me with quiet respect. Not pity, respect. That was the flavor I hadn't tasted in years. Even the ones who doubted me now saw the truth written in ink and judgment. My dignity wasn't just intact. It was sharpened, polished, untouchable. Yara bolted before the judge even left the bench. She stormed out, sunglasses on, phone in hand like a shield. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Her retreat was public enough. People saw her run from the truth, and that humiliation would travel faster than any headline. Back at the cabin that night, I sat by the fire with bourbon in hand, compass warm in my palm. The flames flickered against the brass, reflections of battles past. I thought of my wife, her steady hand on my shoulder when times were hard. I thought of the sacrifices, the nights I stayed late at the plant so Yara could have ballet lessons, new clothes, tuition paid. None of it mattered now. What mattered was that I'd finally learned the difference between giving out of love and being used out of habit. A knock broke the quiet. I opened the door to find Yara herself, mascara streaked, voice raw. She looked smaller than I remembered, like a shadow of the woman who once strutted through social feeds. "Dad," she whispered, "please, can we talk?" For a moment, I saw her at 5 again, holding the compass, asking if it pointed to candy stores. My chest tightened, but then I remembered the posts, the captions, the courtroom lies. I remembered her calling me sick, confused, diminished. A father can forgive many things, but erasure? That's unforgivable. "You had your stage," I said quietly. "Now it's my turn to have peace." Her mouth opened, closed. Tears welled, but I didn't invite her in. Not this time. I closed the door slow, the latch clicking like a lock on the past. I leaned against it, compass pressed to my chest. Outside, I heard her footsteps fade into the night. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel hollow after turning her away. I felt steady. Because true revenge isn't screaming or slamming doors. It's living so well in the silence that the person who betrayed you has to hear it echo. And the silence of that night was louder than any plea she could ever make. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I say it's best served plain, no garnish, no excuses, just the truth plated raw. The days after the verdict stretched long and clean. No phone calls, no courthouse buzz, no gossip worth repeating. Yara vanished from public view, her social feeds gone dark. In a town like ours, silence is more damning than scandal. People noticed her absence. They stopped asking about her, stopped defending her. The queen of hashtags had lost her throne. One afternoon I sat on the porch, compass in my palm, listening to the river's steady hum. The mailman pulled up, left a thick envelope, then drove off without a word. Inside was a letter from Yara, pages of handwriting, smudged in places like the ink had blurred with tears. She begged, accused, bargained all in the same breath. Claimed she never meant the caption, never meant the rumors, never meant to drag me into court. Promised she'd change. Promised she'd be better. Promised. I read it once. Then I folded it back into the envelope and tossed it into the fireplace. Promises are cheap kindling. They burn fast and leave nothing behind. That evening, I hosted something I hadn't in years. Company. Old co-workers from the plant. A couple of neighbors. Even June from the diner. We grilled by the river, drank cold beer, swapped stories. No drama, no demands, just laughter echoing through the trees. At one point, Bill raised a toast. To Stan, true North himself. The compass sat heavy in my pocket, and for the first time, I felt worthy of the title. But peace has a way of attracting storms. A week later, Yara showed up again. This time not alone. She brought a local pastor, hoping to shame me with scripture about forgiveness. She stood on my porch, voice trembling but rehearsed. "Dad, you can't carry this anger forever. It'll eat you alive. God says." I cut her off. God also says honor your father and mother. Where was that when I was in the hospital bed, Yara? The pastor shifted awkwardly, murmured something about reconciliation, then excused himself. He knew when a battle wasn't his to fight. Yara stayed, eyes glistening, words tumbling out. "I've lost everything. Theo, the house, my friends. You're all I have left." Her confession hung in the air like smoke. For a second, I almost reached out. Almost. But then I thought of my wife, her quiet dignity, the way she carried pain without spectacle. I thought of the compass, its arrow steady even when my hand shook. And I knew the truth. Forgiveness without change isn't mercy. It's surrender. I stepped back inside and closed the door. No slam, no rage, just the finality of wood against wood. Through the glass, I saw her crumple on the porch, shoulders shaking. But I didn't move. I couldn't, because sometimes revenge isn't about striking back. It's about refusing to be struck again. And as her sobs faded into the night, I realized the final act was near. The stage was set, the curtain waiting to fall. All that remained was the last image, the one that would close the story for good. They say revenge ends with ashes, but mine ended with sunlight on the river and the sound of my own breath steady, unbroken. The morning of Father's Day dawned clear, the kind of golden June light that makes even broken things look whole. I brewed coffee, sat on the porch, compass warm in my palm. I knew she would come. People like Yara can't resist a stage, even when the audience has walked away. By noon, her car pulled into the gravel drive. She stepped out slower than usual, no sunglasses, no mask of confidence. Just Yara, eyes hollow, shoulders sagging, a bouquet of supermarket roses clutched like an alibi. "Dad," she said softly, walking toward me. "Happy Father's Day." I let the silence hang. The river behind me whispered louder than her voice. She set the flowers on the railing, hands trembling. "I'm sorry. For the caption, for the court, for all of it. I was wrong. I see that now. Please, can we start over?" Her words might have carried weight once, but now they were just echoes. I looked at her, really looked, my daughter, blood my blood, but a stranger all the same. For decades I confused enabling with love, silence with peace. The heart attack had woken me, the betrayals had hardened me, but this moment sealed me. I stood, pulled the compass from my pocket, and held it between us. Its brass gleamed in the sun, arrow steady, unwavering. "Your mother gave me this," I said, "told me it would always point true north. For years, I thought north was you, but I was wrong. North is here." I tapped my chest. "And here," I pointed to the river. "It's the life I built without lies, without begging, without pretending." Tears streaked her cheeks. "So that's it? You're cutting me out forever?" I closed her fingers gently over the roses she brought. "You cut yourself out the day you call me a drama king." All I did was stop holding the scissors. Her breath hitched. She turned, shoulders shaking, and walked back to her car. The gravel crunched under each step, a sound final as a gavel. She didn't look back. I sat again, compass warm against my palm, the roses still on the railing. I watched the car disappear down the road, dust rising behind it like smoke from a dying fire. The river kept flowing, steady, endless, carrying the last remnants of guilt downstream. For years I've been the provider, the rescuer, the backdrop. But that day, I became something else. A man who chose his own peace over someone else's chaos. A man who lived long enough to see that revenge doesn't always need blood or fire. Sometimes it's just a clean cut of walking away and the silence that follows. The compass glinted one last time, and I whispered to the empty air, to my wife, to myself, "True north, sweetheart. I'm home." If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.